Good evening and welcome to Galactic Terrors.
Hello, everybody. We're delighted to have you here.
I'm Jim Chambers.
I'm Carol Gyzander.
And thank you for coming back for the fourth session of our online reading series. We've got a terrific lineup tonight. Danielle Ackley-McPhail is joining us. Rick Poldark, Carol Gyzander will be reading, and Jeff Strand, the legendary horror author. So we're really thrilled to have this group tonight. We're excited for how this reading series has been going, and we want to thank all of you for your ongoing support. It's terrific to see people coming back every month for the Galactic Terrors series. And we do this on the second Thursday of each month at 8 p.m.
I just want to point out, since it is a horror reading, I do have the black cat here, and right at handy. Yeah. That's why I'm on the couch today, because my feline overlord is feeling cranky and says, I want to be near mom.
And you're not superstitious?
No, not at all.
Black cats are good luck.
That's it. That's exactly it. And you know what? Their hair doesn't show up. If you wear all black, the cat hair doesn't show up. It's a wonderful thing.
Oh, that's good. Yes, good thinking.
Yeah.
That's a life hack. Right. So just a few housekeeping words. The Galactic Terrors online reading series is sponsored by the Horror Writers Association's New York chapter, which is an awesome crew based in and around New York City, Long Island, and Lower New York. We know those upstaters who are our friends are often too spread out to take part, but they're always with us in spirit. And the Horror Writers Association, for anyone who's joining us and is not a member or familiar with it, is an international networking and support group for authors of horror fiction in all forms.
And that's one of the interesting things about what's going on with the pandemic. I know we've all been seeing it, that we're all staying closer to home. And as Jim said, some of our New York members are far away, but now with an episode like this, we can bring in people from all over our chapter, as well as guests from out of the area. So I'm trying to look at the good things.
Yes, yeah, it's terrific. It's one of one of those small silver linings in an otherwise pretty downer year, which we are fast approaching the end of. And a couple of things to look forward to next year. Hopefully one will be that we can get back to doing some of these readings in person. And the HWA is hopefully going to pull off StokerCon 2021 next year. It's currently scheduled for May 21st to the 23rd. And a word to those who are thinking of attending: a registration fee will rise as of January 1st. It goes up to $300 from $250. And I know that there's a lot of concern these days with planning, and especially around events and travel. And so we have put out some statements. Brian Matthews, who is the co-chair of StokerCon, with me and the whole StokerCon team, the officers at the HWA, are all watching very closely what things are going to be possible and what might not be possible. And we've been talking with our venue, and we're on top of the situation. We will definitely be letting people know what the final plan is before the refund period expires for your registration. So if you're concerned about registering and that you might not be able to attend, you'll have plenty of time to get a refund if it turns out we have to change dates or change even platform or venue or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, that's great. I went ahead and made a hotel reservation, but my understanding is they can change like any other hotel. So that's great.
Yes.
I'm glad you guys are keeping on top of it, because we don't know what the future will bring, but the fact that we're all together in an episode like this is terrific. And Stoker will be great.
I hope so. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
So.
And I saw something else. Speaking of next year and Stoker and things like that, the Final Frame horror story short competition. The deadline is coming up at the end of this month for those of you who are filmmakers. I'm sure you're already aware of that, so you don't need me nagging at you. But it's coming up at the end of December.
That's the early bird registration deadline. Early bird.
Oh, thank you. I didn't say it right.
Yes. Yeah. So if you have a short film or you have one that's not completed yet, you do have till March, I think, to get that in. But the fee will be more expensive at that time. So, But in other news, I wanted to just take a quick opportunity to give a shout out to one of our HWA NY chapter members, who I believe is in our audience tonight, Teal James Glenn. Teal recently, Teal appeared in a short superhero parody film that recently made it to Amazon Prime streaming, and I had a chance to watch it the other day, and it's terrific, and Teal is fantastic. It's a lot of fun.
It's really fun.
Teal, if you're with us, I made my daughter watch it without telling her you were in it, and she's now your biggest fan, and she said her compliments to the costume designer. She was thrilled with your accent. So good job on that. And the name of the film is Superhero.
All one word, yeah.
If you get a chance to check it out, it's well worth it, and one of our own is in it. So.
And if we could also mention real quickly, the Goodreads Choice Awards for horror has just come out this week, which is pretty exciting because the top 3 books got a lot of votes, but the number 1 is Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia, who is one of the guests of honor at StokerCon 2021. So that's very exciting to see. I don't think anybody's surprised to know that Stephen King is the number 2 book on that list, and the third one coming up real close behind him is another member of our New York chapter of Horror Writers Association, Grady Hendrix. His book, The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, is apparently in great demand. So that's really cool, and we're excited. Congratulations to all of them and all the people on the list and everybody doing Goodreads stuff.
Yes, Grady, quite a great writer. And I was excited to see that book getting so much attention.
And a great presenter as well. He's one of the only people I know who speaks at the same speed I like to listen to my audiobooks, like double time.
Right. Yeah, he can pack a 3-hour presentation into an hour and a half. It's fantastic. So, but I think, we have plenty of time tonight to chat. Maybe we should start heading into our readers. You guys probably came here to hear them and not me and Carol, except when Carol's reading. Then you have to listen with full attention and sit on the edge of your seat. And we'll know if you don't. Yes. But our first reader tonight is Danielle Ackley-McPhail. And Carol, would you like to do the intro honors?
I would be delighted. Award-winning author, editor, and publisher of eSpec Books, Danielle Ackley-McPhail has worked both sides of the published industry for longer than she cares to admit. Her published works include 6 novels, including the recently re-released Baba Ali and the Clockwork Djinn, co-written with Day Al-Muhammad. She's also the author of 6 solo collections, the newest being Eternal Wanderings, the Nonfiction Writer's Guide, the Literary Handyman Build-A-Book Workshop, and the Ginger Kick Cookbook. She's the senior editor of numerous anthologies, including the recently released Footprints in the Stars. Danielle?
Hello, everyone. I'm going to be reading 3 short pieces to you today. The first one is from an upcoming horror collection of mine that does not yet have a title. The story is called Burning Conviction. Ultra-fine, insidious, softly suffocating. Clinging dust coated the cavernous chamber and everything in it. It rose in swirling puffs with every step I took. I rubbed my fingers together and flinched. The dust clung in persistent defiance of any efforts to slough it off. The powder mocked me with a phantom glide of natural oil that spoke of past incarnations. Sweat beaded on my forehead and streamed into my eyes. More trickled between my breasts and down the rest of me. It mingled with the dust that permeated everything I was wearing. Soon, I would resemble the troll-like men moving about the chamber. They were coated in a thick gray crust that cracked, but never seemed to fall away. Across the room, an entire wall of massive convection ovens roared. As I moved closer, the infernal heat drew everything from the air: dust, humidity, oxygen. I opened my mouth to suck in what was to be had. The air scorched my lungs. The heat stole my body's moisture as I choked on dust. Someone get this fucking log out of my way until I'm ready for it. I tensed as the troll shoved past me. Stack it over there with the others, now. I cocked an eye in the direction he gestured to with his thick, knobby chin. Piled long ways in the shadows were disturbingly familiar bundles, each between 5 and 6 feet long, black-bound in a fabric that glimmered with a dull sheen. There was a rough symmetry to them, small and rounded at the top, then doubled in thickness until they tapered to a blunt point, but no two were exact in length or size. I quickly turned away, my jaw clenched, and I swallowed hard against the sensation, tightening my throat. A snarl twitched my lips. I lunged forward. "Move me yourself, you ugly fucker," I screamed back at him. "Who were you calling a—" An explosive pop sounded from the oven, cutting me off. White-hot flame shot out of the opening. The man didn't even look at me. He gave no sign that he heard my words. Instead, Trollboy yelled and cursed and hurried towards the gaping maw of the blazing oven. Granite arms came around my chest, and another set caught up my legs. I struggled and fought like a demon, screaming and cursing to rival the man in charge. He continued to ignore me as he grabbed a massive charred paddle from the corner and slammed it into the fire. There was a loud crack, like bones breaking, and the sound of steam escaping. It rose with the eerie cadence of a keen. I shivered at the suffering in that sound, fell still and silent at the disturbing look on the man's face as he slid the paddle beneath the mound he just pummeled and flipped the mass over within the flame. A piece fell free. I went limp in the grip of those carrying me. Tremor shook my body and my stomach heaved as I stared at the black, gnarled lump that landed just at the edge of the flame. My mind shut down, refusing to recognize what it saw. But it was too late for denial. There before me lay a disembodied hand, black and frozen in a frantic, useless claw. "Okay, I'm ready," he grunted, shoving the paddle aside. Those hauling me towards the mound stopped, and instead moved me forward. I felt the fire's heat upon my face and screamed. The next one is called Ruby Red. There was blood on the counter, just 3 little drops, bright and deep all at once, startling against the white marble. I ran my finger through one gleaming half globe. It smeared a red spectrum along the edge of the sink. I giggled. The sound startled me. It was out of place in the surrounding starkness, slashing a hole in the silence that closed instantly. I was being disrespectful. Dragging my lower lip between my teeth, I reached for the roll of tissue and tore off a couple of squares. With great care, I wiped away the smear I'd made, leaving the remaining 2 drops pristine, and the rest of the counter nothing but white. I balled the tissue and clutched it tight in my fist. The urge to giggle swept through me once more, and I ground down hard on my lip. The pain was sharp and focusing. It allowed me to fight back the urge. It had been so long since I'd been allowed color. They didn't trust me with color. Things happened. I wrapped my arms tight around my body and stared at the remaining 2 drops, lost myself in the play of light upon the gleaming surfaces. They sparkled like gems. My breath quickened, and I had to tuck my hands beneath my arms to keep them still, to keep them from reaching out and playing with the pretty color. "Red," I whispered. It was no more than a breath, nearly just a thought. I didn't want anyone to hear. They would take the drops away. Red, red like rubies, like poppies under the sun, strawberries dripping with dew. The intensity ran like a wire up my spine. Each word drew it taut. Each image sprang into my mind and spawned more. I buried my senses in each thing that surfaced. My eyes were dazzled by the glimmer of jewels. My nose filled with the smell of warm flowers. My tongue savored the sweetness of ripe fruit. Red. The bathroom became a sea of red as my mental images shaped reality. Flower petals scattered over the cold white tile. Ripe fruit crushed beneath my feet as I circled the room. Power swirled around me, brushed my skin, danced among the strands of my hair. It was red as well. Everything was red. I laughed with the joy of color. The white was swept away. Bending, I scooped my hands through the redness, encountered sharp-edged gems. I had found my rubies. The sting of pain was life, and I laughed more. Gone was the sterile white. I lifted my arms, pale white skin trailing beads of blood from 100 little nicks. Red, red like blood. The bite of iron overwhelmed my other senses. The smell, the taste, the slick, thick feel of it against my skin. A liquid red tide swept over me, coating the walls and sweeping away fruit and flowers and gems. Red, red like blood, I whispered again. A mere moving of the lips, drowned out by the pulse of the tide. Red swept me away. And the last one, a particular favorite of mine, A Legacy of Stars. I open the door of heaven, the goddess Shasheta, the book of coming forth by day. Have you ever gazed into the heart of a star? I have. You are blind to anything else forever after, no matter if your eyes are yet capable of seeing. The memory dazzles your vision, your mind, leaves you an open-mouthed awe at the wonder of it. No commonplace sight that the universe may offer can hope to compare. I did not intend to alter my perception so radically. I had no choice in this. My name is Sasheta. It was not always, but any other name I may have laid claim to is long lost to me. Some may know, might even tell you if you ask, but otherwise it would not occur to them, blinded as they are by the lingering light of that star. In darkness, I shine. This likewise was not always so. On the day of my rebirth, I was led to a chamber in the ship no other was allowed to access. Etched into the hatch was a single word, library. I wondered at that as the simple portal opened. Inside was dark, near complete, but for a pinpoint of light on the far wall. The atmosphere was stale, heavy with the scent of dust, despite the steady rumble of cycled air. Go, my keeper ordered. A gentle shove to my back sent me forward, fearing to stumble, fearing what might obstruct my path, unknown, unyielding. But there was nothing. Go, child, you must. There is no other. He was ancient, and all to him were child, no matter that I was no untried youth. I went forward, though I could not bring myself to anything but timid steps. My breath trembled in my chest. I remember this. I can yet feel the slick skin of sweat coating me, clinging my clothes to my body, chilling any bare skin. Nothing came up hard against my shins. Nothing sent me tumbling to the deck. The point of light grew closer, if no bigger. Don't ask me how I knew. Such details simply are since I took up my mantle. You must look through, the keeper murmured at my back, distant in both space and my awareness. Place your eye to the hole. His voice sounded sad to me, but beneath that Hope and dread and uncertainty colored his words. It was an echo of my own heart. Fearful but obedient, I advanced until my breast flattened against riveted steel. The placement of the glass-covered hole forced my head to bow in compliance. It was the last time I would assume such a position. I saw everything and nothing. Every color of light flooded my vision, and all knowledge of the universe was at my command, wrote itself into my very being, until such a simple thing as a name scarce had room for itself. It was buried so deep. For an instant and forever, I heard the music to which all light dances, the singing of stars and the beating of their hearts, felt my sweat-dampened hair ruffled by the solar winds, tasted the bitter cold of space, scented by the aeons. I saw forever in the heart of that star. Do you wonder that I was so changed? Tss, pay attention. I rose that day from where I'd crumbled, with my clothes, myself, my fears burned away. I turned back to face my keeper. By the glow of my bare skin, I became aware of the pictures on the chamber walls, etched glyphs, symbols of another age at once both strange and known to me. They were obsolete, lost in the shadow of all knowledge crowding my thoughts. I retraced my earlier footsteps, no longer timid, no longer blind, though I still could not say if the sight was that of my eyes. I stopped at the threshold where my former keeper had abased himself. I brushed my fingertips across the crown of his bowed head. The fine strands of his aged hair shimmered a moment, and the ancient gasped, his body taut and trembling. Such is common for those star-touched. Hair thickened, gleamed with an ebon hue recalled from long ago years, skin smoothed and twisted joints straightened, until ageless youth rested beneath my hand. Rise, I told him who had for so long remained faithful, and attend me. We walked across the heavens, opened the doors of transcendence, ushered a great many souls. I can tell by your eyes you would ask me why, if only you dared. I will tell you. Mankind was easily lost among the heavens, without someone to guide the way. Ages passed unnoticed. Time means little when star song echoes in your ear. He is gone now, in case you wonder. They are all gone, but for my remembering. I am tired, child, and there is no other. Place your eye to the hole. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed.
Wow, Danielle, that's amazing. Okay, I was really struck, especially with those three together. The first two pieces have such vivid imagery of this crazy stuff going on. I mean, I felt like I was there and I was cooking in the fire and such like that. And it really, really brought out the dark power of those first two pieces. And yet then the third one was just sad and wise and dark and light all at the same time. That's really a great combination.
Thank
So
you.
that's cool. Listen, guys, if you have questions for Danielle, please put them in the chat and we'll ask one coming up there. I saw that Teal had a question already. So can you tell us who is the writer who influenced you the most, Danielle? He says, I hear echoes of Bradbury and Leiber and even Lord Darcy in your tone.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate those compliments. I do my own thing. I don't really, I read voraciously as a child, and while there are authors that I certainly enjoy and will go to repeatedly whenever something new comes out, I'm caught up by the language. I don't really feel influenced by anyone else. It's just the images and the lyricism of the language and the concept it just comes to me. If it's influenced by someone, I don't know who.
You're basically influencing yourself. Yeah. No, I really saw that because the language and the words drew you right into the scene, and then you realize that you're sucked into this powerful situation. Well,
Yeah.
really, really very cool. That's neat. Do you write in one particular genre? Do you call this a genre? Do you go across genre? What do you call what you write?
I write absolutely everywhere. Mostly what I write is fantasy, but all of my fiction is influenced by myth and legend in some way, or at least I use the illusions to add meaning to what I'm writing.
Mhm.
And I just always want to tell a good story, and I never want to get stuck writing just one thing. So I just play everywhere so nobody has a limited expectation of what I might do.
Mhm. Mhm.
Primarily science fiction, some military science fiction and steampunk and urban fantasy for the most part. Sometimes a horror piece will ambush me.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we're going to come back at the end with everybody and talk about works that we have coming up. But Jim had an interesting question. He said he'd like to know how you wound up writing horror. Wanted to hear about your upcoming horror collection. How'd you wind up writing it? He
Well,
thought horror stories scare you.
some of my, well, they don't scare me. It's just I never set out just to terrify somebody,
Okay.
and I try not to go into those deep, dark places that you really need to do justice to the horror genre. But every
Mhm.
once in a while, something will inspire me, and it just happens to come out as horror,
Mhm.
or people challenge me.
Yeah.
One
Okay. Oh, all right. That's
one
cool. That's
one of
cool.
my most epic horror pieces is called In the Dying Light. And iconic author C.J. Henderson challenged me to write a Lovecraftian romance in space.
And that's not tentacle porn. No, we're not going there. No.
Done.
No, no.
And there
That's
are
really
no
cool.
happy endings.
No, I can imagine that that's true. Although I'm just gonna say we had a forge, we had a guy's hand cut off, we saw somebody like visaging blood and red and all this stuff. You've got a nice dark twist to you. That's why I like you. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Danielle. This has been really fun. We're gonna have you come back at the end and talk with our whole group too.
Excellent. I enjoyed being here. Thank you for giving me the time to read.
Yay, very fun. Excellent. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and introduce our next reader, Rick Poldark. A member of the Horror Writers Association, Rick writes science fiction, fantasy, and horror for Severed Press and Lucifer Verlag. He's also a classic car enthusiast, enjoys travel, brews his own ale, and loves to play D&D whenever possible. For more books by Rick Poldark, visit his Amazon author page at, we'll put the link up also, it's tinyurl.com. Y5CNNFVB. I want you all to remember that. Okay, I'd like to welcome Rick Poldark. Thank you.
Good evening. Tonight's reading is from Primordial Island. Given his line of work, Bill was a seasoned flyer. When the plane began to accelerate down the runway, he didn't bat an eye. The lady next to him, however, gripped the edges of her armrests until her knuckles turned white. "It'll be okay," offered Bill. "This is safer than a car." The lady, eyes wide, shot him a dubious look. The plane lifted off the ground, bouncing around on the air, and outside Bill's window, the flashes of light drew closer. They passed through the dark clouds, and within minutes, they reached cruising altitude. There was the occasional chop, which kept the seatbelt sign illuminated, but they were above the clouds. The lady next to him seemed to relax a bit. The riskiest parts of air travel are during takeoff and landing. She smirked at him. "What are you, a pilot?" She had an accent. He guessed she lived in Vietnam and was visiting relatives in Australia. Bill smiled. "No, but I fly a lot for work. My name is Bill." She smiled. "I'm Bion. Nice to meet you." "Visiting relatives?" "Yes, my daughter lives in Melbourne." "Oh, that's where I'm returning to." Beyond loosened her grip on the armrests, but she startled when the plane jostled in the turbulence. Nice city. Bill smiled. I like it. He looked out the window. Nasty weather out there. The plane shuddered again, suddenly dropping a bit, causing that unpleasant tickle in the pit of his stomach. Beyond groaned. Oh, I hate flying, especially those quick drops. Just think of the air like a road. It's just as solid to a plane as pavement is to a car. Beyond frowned. How can it be solid if it's air? The plane dipped again. It's just turbulence, like bumps in the road. You don't sound like you're from Melbourne, said Beyond. That's because I'm originally from New York. I moved to Melbourne a few years ago when I took a job with my company. Another abrupt drop in altitude. The lights on the plane flickered. Even the flight attendants looked flustered as they smoothed out their outfits and regained their bearings. Beyond was watching them, concerned. I'm thinking of moving to Melbourne myself to be closer to my daughter. Do you have a family? Bill smiled. A wife and 2 boys. How old? 8 and 10. Real handfuls, the both of them. Beyond chuckled, but it was a nervous sound. My daughter was too. Still is. She hasn't settled down yet. I'm not getting any younger. I want some grandkids to play with. Bill sneered. Anytime you want to borrow mine, I'd be happy to rent them out for a small fee. Are they housebroken? Most of the time. Bill was pleased Beyond was relaxed enough to quip with him. The plane dipped again. This time, one of the flight attendants cried out. This isn't right, said Bill. Don't say that, snapped Beyond. You're supposed to be the voice of reason. A mother coddled her young child, who clung to her afraid. The other passengers were murmuring to each other in a mix of dissatisfaction and concern. There was a clattering sound outside Bill's window and a loud bang. Before he could look outside, the plane dropped and angled downward. The passengers all cried out and screamed. Bill clutched his stomach as it lurched up. The drop was so sudden, it felt as if he'd left his soul somewhere above him. Beyond grabbed his arm and screamed. The pilot came on the intercom issuing instructions, but the tinny voice was drowned out by the din of the panic in the cabin. Oxygen masks dropped down from the ceiling. Bill snatched his out of the air and quickly strapped it to his face. He turned to his right to find Beyond unconscious. He grabbed her mask and slipped it onto her face, securing it as best as he could. The plane lurched and bucked in the air, still dropping altitude rapidly. Flight attendants were shouting something about assuming the crash position and then strapped in. Bill leaned Beyond forward, and he leaned forward himself. His mind raced with many horrible permutations of what was coming. If they were crashing into the ocean, he would grab the vest from under his seat cushion, and the cushion itself would serve as a flotation device. Once he was set, he would attend to Beyond. If they were crashing on land, there was nothing he could do except hope he survived the impact. All the times he flew in a plane, and nothing like this had happened before. His mind succumbed to panic in concert with his stomach. He wanted to grab onto something to steady himself, anything. The plane leveled out a bit, preparing for landing. There was a loud bang as the ground rushed up to meet the descending metal cylinder. Bill's mind jarred, and everything went black. There was a flicker of the cabin being torn apart. He briefly felt rain on his face, and his eyes were bleached by a flashing light, then blackness. Bill awoke in his seat, and he hung sideways from his seatbelt, hovering over Beyond. His vision was blurry, and his head thundered with pain. Actual thunder crashed above him as rain pelted the back of his head. He reached to his left to feel for the side of the cabin, but it wasn't there. His window was gone. Instead, his fingers found the edge of jagged metal. As his vision cleared, he saw Beyond hanging sideways beneath him, her limp legs dangling over the aisle. Bill looked around and realized the cabin had been torn in two and exposed to the outside. He saw lush vegetation in the moonlight. He heard the pitter-patter of rain on large tropical leaves. There were bodies strewn about, dangling from seats, lying on the muddy ground beneath them. He reached out and shook Beyond. Beyond, are you okay? "Beon!" She didn't move. He could only see the back of her head. There was no motion in the cabin. Was he the only survivor? There was a thunderous, low-pitched sound in the distance. Bill knew it wasn't thunder. It had a low, growling quality to it, like a pack of lions roaring in unison, but muffled. He looked at the tree line at the edge of the small clearing. The trees and vegetation were shifting about. Was the wind that strong? It wasn't the wind. Something was pushing its way through to the clearing. Something big. He heard the sound of heavy footfalls as thin tree trunks were shoved away from each other at right angles. A large, dark shape loomed at the edge. There was a low growl like that of a tiger. The low-pitched sound traveled across the clearing, triggering panic in Bill. He not only heard the growl, he felt it. A large head poked into the clearing. It looked like a giant bird, its head and torso covered in white feathers. Only the beak was too short and fat. That's because it wasn't a beak. It ambled out into the clearing, sniffing the air. Bill wondered if he had died and gone to a worse place, because the thing hunched about a dozen meters off the ground. It had a long tail that was feathered at the tip. It moved its head from side to side, sizing up the wreckage of the machine that dropped out of the sky. It approached cautiously, sniffing the air and grunting. It stomped over to the remnants of the plane, scanning the length of it with its eyes. Bill remained absolutely still. It was on the other end of the wreckage, and he didn't want to draw attention to himself. He prayed it would investigate, lose interest, and vanish back into the trees from whence it came. It nudged the broken fuselage with its snout, and the whole thing moved. Bill whimpered as he was tilted to his left. It let out a burst of air out of its nostrils, emitting a high-pitched whine. It nudged the fuselage again, and then a third time, pushing hard until the body of the plane was righted. Bill felt the plane roll upright, and he was no longer hanging in the air. His hands drifted to his seatbelt buckle. It fluffed its feathers on its head like a parakeet, and it looked like it had a punk rocker hairdo. It sniffed the air a bit more and let out a roar, jumping backward away from the wreckage. When there was no reaction from the wreckage, it crept forward, emboldened. It pushed its nose into the seat, sniffing loudly. It let out a low growl and opened its massive jaws, snatching a body from its seat with its front teeth. Still belted in, the lifeless torso tore away. It tilted its head back as it tossed a morsel to its back teeth, and it bit down. Blood dripped past its lips, staining its white feathers as it crunched bone and pulverized flesh. It swallowed the scrap and thrust its nose back into the seat. Jesus! It's eating the passengers. It's eating the damn passengers. Bill realized that he was a sitting duck in his seat. He slowly worked his hands, opening the belt buckle. He slid the two parts of his seatbelt off his body with a slow, deliberate movement. It tore other bodies away from their seats, gripping them with its front teeth, and chewed and swallowed them. It was a disgusting sight. The passengers were already dead, or so Bill hoped, so they didn't feel anything, but it was horrific to watch this thing feed. It even lifted a huge muscular hind leg and steadied the fuselage with its clawed foot as it pulled away pieces of meat. Bill heard crying from up ahead of him. Someone else was alive. Shush, he thought to himself. Whoever it was, he or she was going to attract the thing's attention. Then he saw someone stand up. It was a woman. He could tell in the moonlight it was a woman because of her long hair. She appeared woozy, swaying on her feet, holding her head. Sit down! Don't you see it? She screamed, answering his silent question. The large feathered beast tufted its feathers on its head, and it let out a deafening roar that sounded part freight train, part animal. The woman turned and began to limp down the aisle. She was heading right for Bill. It took its foot off the fuselage, hunched over, and began to stomp alongside the plane, following her. Taking large strides, it was gaining on her fast. Bill thought of that movie, the really popular one with the dinosaurs. Stop! The woman, startled to hear another human voice, froze dead in her tracks. "Don't move," Bill called out. "It can't see you if you don't move." At least he hoped that was the case. That movie was supposed to be thoroughly researched. Plus, the book it was based on was written by a physician. Terrified, the woman stood rigid several rows from where Bill sat. Their eyes met, but their moment was interrupted when the large, thundering beast stopped short right next to the part of the plane where she stood. It sniffed the air above her. Its raccoon eyes, hidden in the shadow of sharp cranial ridges, were alert. Its teeth were long and sharp. They looked to be almost a foot long. Bill silently mouthed the words, "Don't move." The woman, shoulders raised up to her ears, froze, but she was sobbing softly. Her body trembled as rain matted her hair to her face. Her teeth were clenched as she stifled a scream. The beast reached down and nudged her with its snout, its diminutive hands on short arms curling their 2 4-inch claws. She startled, staring straight ahead, shuddering from abject terror and the rain on her skin. But she stood her ground as it nudged her a couple more times, its nostrils drinking in her scent. Oh, crap. She must have seen the look on Bill's face because she crouched, ready to run, when the thing snatched her up in its jaws, spraying the seats with her blood, her cry stifled by foot-long teeth piercing her ribcage and crushing her lungs. Bill wasn't going to stick around to be dessert. He jumped out of his seat and rolled off the left side of the fuselage, passing over where his window would have been, and he dropped to the mud below. He rolled under the curved edge of the fuselage and hid. He heard crunching sounds as the poor woman he condemned to death with advice derived from popular culture was being devoured. The fuselage sank a bit, and he shifted away from it to avoid being pinned under the curvature of metal. The beast must have had its foot on the wreckage again, and it was bearing down on it with all its weight. Was it looking for him? He heard more growling and sniffing, and the fuselage pressed down as the beast reached into the seats, no doubt picking more morsels to be eaten. Bill didn't dare move. This thing had better eyesight than the movies had depicted. All he could do was wait, hidden in shadow under the curvature of the fuselage, until this thing had its fill and moved on. Bion wasn't going to make it to her daughters, and he prayed that he'd live to see his wife and 2 boys again. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Rick. I think we have a really good comment in the chat that sums this up nicely. Monstrous. So I actually have a couple of questions for you.
Sure.
So you brew your own ale?
Yes. In fact, it's a great pandemic activity.
What's that?
It's a great pandemic activity because we can't do much else.
That's true. And then you have plenty of time to drink it and
That's
start
right.
over.
That's right.
What kind of ale?
I lately I've been using European ingredients because it seems to come out heartier, and I take local honey grown, locally. My last batch was from up in Yorktown, Wilkins Farm. And what's great about the honey, I didn't use honey until more recently, is it kind of filters out a lot of the impurities. And the great thing about honey is a lot of sugar. So even after you bottle it, it keeps on fermenting. So you're talking about 12, 13, 14% alcohol, but it's really smooth. The honey, and I use wild honey. I like to use wild honey. And I tested it out on my family 2 Thanksgivings ago. And that was one of the best Thanksgivings on record. I mean, people were telling corny jokes. People were hugging each other. We were just laughing and having a good time. And,
That's
people
awesome.
had to sober up before driving home.
Yes, make sure they sober up.
Absolutely.
Well, I think achievement unlocked here. Nancy has declared you've secured a spot on Team Apocalypse.
Awesome.
Yes.
Especially if it's a dinosaur apocalypse.
Exactly. Yes. And Patrick, who is a beekeeper and produces honey.
Yes. I have to make a Patrick ale at some point. We have to make that happen, Patrick.
There you go.
A free-balled ale.
To get back to, I guess, writing and stuff. Dinosaurs.
Yes.
So have you been fascinated with dinosaurs for a long time, or is this something I think most kids go through that phase.
It's a phase? It's just a phase?
That was my question.
I'm
Did
waiting
you
for
just
mine to
never
end.
outgrow the phase? Yeah.
No, I haven't. And what's interesting about dinosaurs is no matter how much we think we know, or paleontology, kind of posits, there's always new theories, new hypotheses, corrections of old hypotheses. Was the T-Rex a predator? Was it a scavenger? Was it both? Now at first they thought it was one more a predator. Now they think it's actually both, because some fossilized evidence was found where there were a bunch of, say, Triceratops or Stegosaurus or whatever, dead in a valley where there was a big flood, and somehow they could tell how they died, I guess from drowning. But then there are teeth marks on the bones from a theropod like a T-Rex, so they think T-Rex were also scavengers. So it's just interesting. I mean, everything that was thoroughly researched to write Jurassic Park and the movie has actually been proven false, mostly because it just keeps evolving, like all sciences. They evolve.
Yeah, it's a process. It's, rarely do things kind of become carved in stone.
Right.
So we have a question from Carol Gyzander. Can you tell us about the translations of your works into different languages?
Yes. Over the summer, Lucifer Verlag actually bought the rights to purchase to translate Primordial Island into German, which is really exciting. It was released for pre-sales in the summer and immediately hit the bestseller list in Germany.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it was great, and it doesn't come out until February. So that's pretty exciting. I can't wait for it to come out, because I can't really read German, but it'd be kind of cool to see it.
Yeah, definitely. That's great.
Yeah.
They did their own cover for it too.
Yes, they did their own cover art. They re-edited it. It was almost like a completely new project.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, they put a lot of effort into it. Yep.
And now you have a sequel out.
Yes, it just came out in October. Return to Primordial Island. Why would they return? Why would they return? Because there has to be a sequel. That's why they returned.
Exactly. Well,
And,
look, it's there. Somebody thought it was a good idea to go back and.
Yes. Well, money drives everything, and greedy corporations, and you uncover an uncharted island filled with dinosaurs, you're going to want to exploit it in some way, because that's human nature.
Yeah, exactly. I think you're right. I think that that's a Pandora box that people could not resist opening.
Right. And even for the scientists, even for the paleontologists who know it's a horrible idea, this is what they've been studying their whole life, through excavations and bones in the ground. Now they get to see it walking and breathing and roaring and chasing and eating. And it's a totally different experience, of course.
Yes, I'm sure that they have some nasty surprises waiting for them. So, all right, great. Rick, thank you so much. We'll have you come back on at the end. We'll be doing a little more chatting, and you can tell us then about your upcoming projects.
Cool.
And thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, our next reader is Carol Gyzander, who happens to also be our co-host, as I'm sure you noticed. Carol writes and edits horror, dark fiction, and sci-fi stories from her couch, with a Velcro cat firmly attached to her side. Her stories are in a dozen anthologies, including Across the Universe, Tales of Alternate Beetles, also featuring stories by Cat Rambo, Spider Robinson, and David Gerald. She's reading from The Devil's Due, an anthology of Faustian tales from Valhalla Books, where nothing is ever as it seems. Carol took care of both parents through their Alzheimer's and believes that sometimes true life can be more horrifying than what we write. Yet she persists. Welcome, Carol Gyzander.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm going to be reading a story from the anthology The Devil's Due. And the subtitle is Nothing is Ever as It Seems. It's a collection of Faustian tales, and you'll sort of see what I'm talking about when we get into my story. It's called Face It. I'm going to read part of the first section. Connor drove down the 2-lane highway, heading to their country house after their latest visit to the hospital. Amy, his wife, sat dozing in the seat next to him. It was late at night, and she was exhausted from the rounds of medical testing she'd undergone. Again, none of it had shown any difference. No good news. He sighed and rubbed his face to try and wake up, his blue eyes bleary with fatigue. It wouldn't do to run off the road. I'm just so tired of it all. His glance flickered over to his wife. The side of her face that was toward him was smooth and unlined, but he knew what the other side looked like. Had been staring at it over breakfast every day for the past 2 years. Creased and full of pus-filled blisters, and part of the cheekbone eaten away. Her eye was sunken down into her face. It was just a matter of time until it spread to the side nearest him, or her brain. For now, in this moment, he could almost pretend she was not affected by the terrible disease. But deep down in his heart, he knew she was dying. Knew what the doctors told him every time: there was no cure, no way of arresting the progress of the flesh-eating disease. They even had a name for it, ETR, that made his fists clench and his stomach roil. He knew the letters stood for some technical terms, but could never make himself remember what the acronym represented. He couldn't get past the idea that the damn disease was eating his wife alive, and just called it Eater. Her head lolled a little as she slept, turning toward him. And when he glanced over the next time, he saw the ravage of the other side of her face, which extended down her neck and shoulder, into her arm. Her hand was clenched and twisted in her lap. Eater, fuck me. He replayed in his head the reaction of the people at the hospital as he brought her in, the way even the medical professionals had pulled back from her. Not to mention the way ordinary people reacted to the two of them. It had gotten difficult for them to go out in public anymore. People feared she was contagious, which she wasn't, and countless times they'd been refused service at a restaurant or asked to leave a cocktail lounge. People wouldn't even shake his hand. Connor and Amy had been the it couple for years, with money, prestige, society connections. Then their busy social life, once so bright and vibrant, had slipped away as her Eater disease progressed. They spent most of the time home alone. Friends no longer stopped by to visit. What kind of life is this for either of us? She had pleaded with him to help her finish the struggle. I just can't do it myself, she'd said. But I can't stand what this is doing to you, to us, but mostly to you. I know I'm going to die. Where's the quality of life anymore? Her one good eye had searched his bright blue ones, looking for some kind of a response. Well, he had refused, of course. How could he kill his wife? Even if she had begged him, which she had, in a stunning display of the power that desperation and anxiety could have over a strong person, she had let her normally capable veneer slip to show her inner fear. And he had turned her down. What does that make me? Don't I love her anymore? Or maybe I'm just afraid of going to jail. Of course, he already felt like he was in jail. No friends, no life, just stay home and watch Netflix while he took care of his sick wife. She didn't deserve it, but then again, he didn't either. Only one part of his mind was on the driving, as they were the only car on the road at that late hour. He took a corner on the rural road a bit too fast, and the car swerved along the shoulder. He gave himself a scare as he yanked the wheel to pull the car back into the lane. Wow, almost drove off the road there. Would have hit the trees, and at this speed, damn. Well, if it killed us, at least she would have gotten her wish. He mulled this thought over as he drove along at a more sedate speed. She had not even woken when the car swerved, had no idea the danger they just averted. The steady consumption of painkillers her condition required left her mostly absent from his world. But if I do that, it kills us both. Is that what she wants? I don't think so. She just wants to end her suffering and therefore end mine. She doesn't want for me to die too, right? He looked over at her again, reached out to hold her hand where it lay on her lap. I love you, darling. But maybe you are right. This is no life for you. Or for me. He released her hand and slid his fingers down to the buckle of her seatbelt. Pushed in the button. Released the belt, controlling it to let it retract quietly into the door. Okay, I'm not really going to do it, but if I do fall asleep on the road, she wouldn't want me to walk away from the accident, right? She wouldn't. Of course, I would be okay. Oodles of airbags in this car. I mean, with my seatbelt on and the airbags, I'm sure I'd be fine. What about her? He looked over the dashboard on her side of the car, saw the button for the passenger airbag, idly reached up a hand and stroked the button, pushed it in. It lit up, passenger airbag off. Well, that would probably make a difference, wouldn't it? I mean, if I actually fall asleep on the road, it's not like I'm planning to or anything, but if I did, she did ask me to. She begged me. She's had enough. I'll be doing her a favor. It's not just for me, so that people stop identifying me with this horror that's eating my wife. Fucking eater. No, it's not just for me. His hands tightened on the wheel and his foot pressed harder on the accelerator. The car leapt forward, barreling down the deserted two-lane highway through the woods at breakneck speed. He had trouble making one curve, the tires screeching as he went around it. Her head lolled back and forth, but she didn't wake. Too many pain meds. He saw the perfect situation up ahead. The road curved to the left, with a large clump of trees on the right. Her side. He took a deep breath and settled himself in the driver's seat. Moved one hand off the wheel. They said that airbags going off commonly push the driver's hand into their face, breaking their arm and smashing their teeth. No point in messing with my own face, is there? He kept going toward the corner. The road banked slightly to the left, but he steered straight ahead, not following the curve. As he drove off the road, heading for the trees, his breath caught in his throat. I love you, honey, but I love me more. Then all went black. Okay, I'm going to jump over the hospital scene where he discovers that, yes, Amy was killed in the crash. He has mixed feelings, but mostly relief. He has a broken arm and his face is heavily bandaged. It was apparently smashed in the accident. Connor's been getting round-the-clock care. So he wasn't really surprised when he woke in the middle of the night with someone in his room. His gaze was drawn to the light at the end of his bed. A man in a black robe and old-fashioned colonial wig sat at a raised desk, holding a gavel and staring down at him with red eyes. The man was lit from behind with a harsh glow so that Connor had trouble seeing his face. About time you woke up. I've been waiting, the man said. What the hell? Connor flailed around in the bed a bit, then realized he wasn't going to be able to sit up on his own. Why are you in my room, and what's that light coming from? He looked at the base of the judge's bench and saw only swirling dark clouds outlined against a bright light. Why is anybody anywhere? That's the question. Why are you here and your wife isn't? Connor's hand went to his mouth. The car, there was an accident, you see. She died. The man nodded his head, frowning. I see. That's your story? Yes. Who are you and why are you here? Are you with the medical staff? I'm asking the questions here. So you say your wife died? Connor nodded. What's going on? Is he really a judge? Man sat back and crossed his arms at the desk, looking down his nose at Connor. I say she was killed. I say you killed your wife. Can you deny that? Connor gasped. It was an accident, I swear. The car went off the road at the curve. I must have fallen asleep or something. Am I in court or what? Well, there will be a judgment here. The judge chuckled. That's for sure. The doctor said I could go home in a few days. Connor's voice took on a whiny quality. If I allow it, you can go home. But as I said, it's important that you know they will not be able to fix your face. People are going to stare and shy away from you for the rest of your life. But you do have an option where you don't have to be ugly and deformed forever. Do you want to hear about it? So yeah, Connor's offered a deal where he can fix his face and atone for the death of his wife, but as the book says, nothing is ever as it seems. Thank you.
Carol, thank you so much.
Cool.
That's a great piece.
And I was being kitty bond too, right?
Yes, you were. Yeah, a little
Yeah.
guest star, a cameo. Is that the Velcro cat, the legendary?
That's the legendary Velcro cat. She made me sit on the couch so that she didn't. One time I tried to do a presentation and she was not happy and she howled for the whole time. So I just said, let me sit here where she's happy.
Oh, geez. Okay. She's pushy.
Yeah, it's a good thing we know who's in charge here, you know?
Right. My dog only gets that pushy if there's food involved.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Food is important, you know? It's the ultimate. It's the ultimate. Yeah.
Yes. So,
True.
but thank you for reading that. Now, that was just published October, right?
Yes, it came out on Halloween. The anthology is full of different tales of Faustian deals, basically. You know, deals with the devil or things that have gone wrong. And, you know, it was an interesting decision to think about what to write about. And I kind of want to focus on what happens to him after he's made a decision. I went through this with my parents. You know, they took a large part of my life, and you know, where do you draw that line of what's right for you as the caregiver and what's right for the person? But I have the feeling he sort of made a decision that was a little bit more in his self-interest than maybe it could have been. So he's going to have some explaining to do.
So this is sort of a personal story for you in a lot of ways.
Yeah, in a way it was. I redirected, you know, the actual circumstance, but it was cool. But there's a bunch of other cool stories in the anthology. Some of them are more fantasy oriented, and there's a Western one. You know, it's an intriguing combination. Yeah. So.
All right, I'm going to pull up a question here from Teal. How did you choose this moment of life, of death? What drove you to look into this corner of decision?
It's a very interesting question. You know, there's things that we all have to deal with, and we all have to decide, and you know, we have to figure out what's important for us. You know, and I think that decisions are an interesting thing. As once we've made a decision, even sometimes in the spur of the moment, we can regret it later. I think Connor's going to. So we'll find out more about that. Yeah. But thank you for asking.
That's great. So do you think that horror stories work best when they come from sort of that root of personal experience, or is that an essential?
I do. I think so. I think one of the advantages of horror is that it's the kind of community and the kind of field of endeavor where we can look at some of the dark and ugly things. You know, some of the stories that I write, when I try to read them at a just a plain science fiction convention or a plain fantasy convention, I kind of get, you know, one of those eyes. You know, I write science fiction stories too, but I think there's an advantage in being able to look at some of the darker side of stuff. So.
Yeah, but it definitely, you need to go to the right audience.
That's quite true. That's quite true.
I've had a similar experience reading horror stories at conventions that skewed more sci-fi and fantasy, and
yeah.
You know, it's people are appreciative, but sometimes it's just not their cup of tea.
Yeah. You have to know what to expect. That's key.
Yes, yeah. Exactly. All right. Do we have any other questions from the audience, or shall we move on to our next reader for the evening, our final reader?
I'm looking forward to it.
Terrific. All right. Well, then, without further ado, I'm going to bid Carol adieu. So I guess there was some further ado. Sorry.
Something.
Yes. And we're going to move on to Jeff Strand. Jeff has been writing horror for a long time, and he has quite an impressive list of publications. He has written more than 100 short stories and almost 50 books, including Pressure, Dweller, My Pretties, Clown vs. Spiders, A Bad Day for Voodoo, and A Bad Day for Voodoo. The story he will be reading comes from his collection, Candy Coated Madness. He is an active member of the Horror Writers Association Atlanta chapter, and you can visit his website at www.jeffstrand.com. So please join us in welcoming Jeff Strand.
Hello. Yes, this is the lead story in my new collection, Candy Coated Madness, and it is called Virtual Reality Kill Zone. Have you ever dreamt of committing the act of murder? Asked Mitchell, staring directly into the client's eyes. Of taking an actual human life? Wesley shrugged and nodded. Well, yeah, sometimes, I guess. Mitchell smiled. His partner, Evan, sat next to him. The office was small and shabby, with just enough room to the side of the desk to allow them to squeeze past it, rather than climbing over or under it. The fluorescent light gave everything a sickly yellow hue. Our state-of-the-art virtual reality experience will allow you to simulate this horrific and thrilling act, said Mitchell. Every sensation will be as real as if it were actually happening, said Evan. You will feel every plunge of the knife as you kill a hooker. You will feel her warm blood as it splashes onto your chest. If some accidentally gets in your mouth, you will taste its coppery flavor. Wow, said Wesley. And we offer this for the low price of only $99.99 today only. How does it work? Wesley asked. Do I have to wear a full bodysuit or something? Oh, no, Mitchell assured him. You're in the virtual reality environment right now. I am? Yes, indeed. Wesley looked around, astonished by the view. The office looks tiny and rat-infested because thousands of hours of programming to make it look that way, said Evan. You smell the mildew? Wesley inhaled. I sure do. Virtual mildew. Mitchell picked up a stapler. This is not a real stapler. It's ones and zeros. But if I stapled your hand, you'd feel it. That's incredible, said Wesley. So in this virtual environment, you're going to go out, hire a prostitute, bring her back to a hotel room, kill her, and then hide all evidence of your crime. Wesley frowned. Why do I have to hide the evidence if it didn't really happen? Covering up your crime is the best part, said Evan. Is it? Oh yeah, any serial killer will tell you that. Wesley looked around the office. This all just feels so real. He picked up the stapler and pressed it against his palm hard enough to release a staple. Then he winced in pain. If I'd been able to anticipate your action, I would have advised against that, Evan told him. Now you're going to have to stab with your other hand, said Mitchell. Wesley whimpered as he pulled out the staple. Can you make the pain go away? No, sorry, said Mitchell. If the pain disappeared, it would take you out of the virtual reality we've so carefully constructed. Oh. So, said Evan, are you ready to kill a hooker? Wesley, Evan, and Mitchell stepped out of the office, which was in a rundown strip mall. Wesley looked around. Are we still in the virtual environment? Yep, said Evan. The parking lot looks exactly like it did when I got here. It certainly does. Every pixel has been meticulously programmed. We're all still back in the office. Can you turn it off for a second so I can see? No. Maybe I don't want to kill a hooker. If anything is possible, maybe I could, have sex with a dozen women or something. Sorry, said Mitchell. You paid for the killer hooker scenario. Get in your car and follow us, said Evan. We're not going very far. They drove in separate cars to the bad part of town. Didn't take them very long to find a prostitute standing on a street corner. They parked across the street from her, and then Wesley got into the back seat of Mitchell and Evan's car. She's perfect, said Mitchell. She looks nice, Wesley agreed. She's not. Top designers programmed her to be a filthy, disease-ridden whore. God doesn't love her. She needs to be cleansed from the earth. Oh. Evan handed Wesley a small packet. Here's some crack. You're going to give this to her now and promise her $50 later. Wesley rubbed the packet. The bag feels so real. You know where to take her, right? Yeah. Don't kill her early. I won't. If you kill her early, it will disrupt the programming, said Evan. You do not want to be in the virtual environment when that happens. We're talking aneurysms, said Mitchell. Lobotomies, heads exploding. Wesley nodded. I won't kill her early, I promise. Then good luck to you. Wesley got out of the car and walked over to the prostitute. This was so exciting. Hi, he said. Want some crack? The prostitute, giving him an extremely wary look, stepped away. No, thank you. Oh, sorry. What I meant was, would you like some crack cocaine in exchange for sexual favors? Please don't come near me. What's wrong? Wesley smiled. Oh, sorry. I forgot the other part. There's also $50 for you after we're done with the sexual favors. You can't just blurt that out, said the prostitute. What's the matter with you? I thought hookers liked money and crack. Wesley reached out and touched her arm. Wow, it feels just like a real arm. The prostitute took the packet from him. I've been with weirder guys, but try to tone it down, okay? They returned to Wesley's car. Do you have a backstory? Wesley asked her as they drove back to the hotel. What do you mean? Where were you born? Delaware? Wow, that's amazing. They thought of everything. Mitchell and Evan sat next to each other, watching the live video feed of Wesley's hotel room on a laptop computer. Wesley and the prostitute entered the room. She looked around, obviously checking for signs of law enforcement. Mitchell handed Evan the bottle of lube. Thanks, said Evan, unzipping his pants. This was going to be sweet. Wesley walked over to the bed. Delaware. Wow, the attention to detail is astounding. Mind if I freshen up? Asked the prostitute. Oh, sure. She walked into the bathroom. Wesley lifted a pillow and picked up the very large knife that rested underneath it. Wesley grinned. Hey, the knife is here, just like you guys said. Who are you talking to? Asked the prostitute, walking out of the bathroom. She noticed the knife, gasped, hurried back into the bathroom and slammed the door shut. Whoops, said Wesley. He walked over to the door and tested the handle. It was locked. So guys, is this like a video game now? Do I have to find the key? How does this work? In the other room, Mitchell sighed. He is so fucking stupid. We needed him to be stupid, said Evan. We needed a certain level of stupidity from him, but he's exceeding it. Damn it. Mitchell and Evan zipped up their pants and stood up. They left their hotel room and walked to the adjoining one. Hi, guys, said Wesley as they entered the room. Hey, she locked herself in the bathroom. We know. Are you sure we're in a virtual reality simulation? I know you said we were, but for example, why didn't you just teleport in here? Teleportation would pull you out of the illusion. But I want to be pulled out of the illusion. I want to fly around like Superman. I want tentacles to sprout out of my face. I want everybody's face to turn into a talking mushroom. This is too realistic. If that's what you wanted, you should have spent your $99.99 elsewhere, said Evan. My elbow itches, said Wesley. Why would my elbow itch in virtual reality? What you should be saying is, my elbow itches. I can't believe this technology is so advanced that my elbow itches. I don't want it to itch. That just reminds me that in real life I have a rash. The bathroom door flew open. The prostitute ran out, clutching a large shard of broken mirror. Mitchell stepped out of the way, but Evan didn't move quickly enough. She slammed the mirror shard into his neck several times until it broke off. Evan dropped to his knees, spurting blood. Mitchell cried out in horror. The prostitute ran for the door. Wesley flung his knife at her. The handle struck her in the back of the head, knocking her to the floor. Evan clutched at his throat, gurgling. No offense, said Wesley, but that blood looks kind of fake. He reached down and put his hand under the geyser. Warm, though. Feels nice. The prostitute started to get back up. Stop her! Mitchell shouted. Wesley charged at her. The prostitute picked up the knife and, just as he reached her, slashed the blade across his leg. He cried out in pain, stumbled, and smacked really hard into the wall. He turned back around, nose bleeding. This isn't fun anymore, he noted. Don't let her get away! The prostitute stood up, still holding the knife. Keeping the weapon extended toward Wesley, she reached for the doorknob. But she couldn't turn it. Her hand was covered with blood. The knob was too slippery. Wesley lunged at her. She stabbed him in the chest. I think I'm done now, said Wesley, stumbling back against the wall. End simulation! The prostitute managed to pull the door open. Mitchell ran over there, slamming the door shut before she could escape. She stabbed him in the center of the face. The blade went in all the way to the handle. Mitchell shrieked and fell onto the bed, the knife still protruding from his nose. Evan managed to get to his feet, drenched in his own blood. Oh, come on. Nobody could still be alive after that, said Wesley. End simulation. Help me, whispered Evan before he collapsed again. The prostitute curled her fingers so that her long nails were like claws. She attacked Wesley, knocking him to the floor, then slammed her nails into him again and again and again. She wiped off the blood that had squirted onto her face, then hurried back over to the door. This time she managed to get it open. She ran out of the room. Mitchell pulled the knife out of his face, then went still. Wesley sat up. He touched the eyeball that hung by a stalk and flinched. He spat out some blood and a couple of teeth. Virtual reality environment, my ass. And that was Virtual Reality Kill Zone from Candy Coated Madness, available now.
That is awesome. I'm glad we asked you for something family, family friendly. Yeah. No, it's really cool. All the way through, people in the chat were like, "Oh, Evan sketchy. Wait a minute. Oh, it was so much fun to see the evolution of thought as people were listening. That was really cool. That was neat. Well, thank you for reading. I'm intrigued. You have so many short stories, and yet you have so many novels as well. And this short story is just contained in this one little thing here. But what's your feel about short stories versus novels?
I like both of them. Short stories are fun because I can be way goofier than I am in a novel. My books, they're horror comedies, a lot of them, but they aren't like inherently funny premises. Mm-hmm. It's generally a serious premise, and then there's funny dialogue or the situation spirals out of control. But the humor comes from other sources. But in short stories, I can have something as stupid as a guy doesn't realize he's not really in a virtual reality simulation and is in fact supposed to be killing a hooker so these guys can watch him from another hotel. Something I can do in a 3,000-word story that I wouldn't do in a full-length novel. So
yes.
Every issue of my newsletter has a original short story, and those are as goofy as I can possibly make them. So short stories are fun because I don't have to commit to the silliness of a premise over
and draw it all out.
I can just be really stupid. This story, after if it's extended any longer, the joke is over. But it
yeah, because he should figure it out by some point.
I like both of them, actually. I'm just as proud of my short story collections as I am of the novel. So I enjoy both forms.
Now, I understand you studied creative writing a few years ago. Has that helped you in your writing? Have you learned all the things you needed to know since then, during then, or both?
Not a whole lot. Actually, my nonfiction book discusses some of the creative writing stuff. And it seemed like a good idea at the time when I was in my early 20s and thought, well, I'm going to college. I'm going to major in what I want to do with my life. I feel like just writing and discussing it with other writers is a much better solution than sitting in classrooms and having discussed. Of course, if you have a good instructor, the Seton Hill, getting a master's degree in writing popular fiction, that is obviously very helpful. People like that have said it's a life-changing experience, but going to a non-genre where you're mostly studying poetry and that kind of stuff is not as helpful for someone like me who actively wanted to make a living at it, not to, express myself through poetry type stuff. So.
Well, I remember when I went to college and I declared my major as anthropology, my mother's answer was, well, you can't put butter on that and eat it. Yeah. So, oh well. So we have a question from Paul. What's your favorite short story that you wrote? And what is your favorite short by another writer?
I'll start with the one by another writer because that's easy. I think my favorite short story of all time is Night Calls the Green Falcon by Robert McCammon. Which is basically about a actor in a serial who is investigating a serial killer, and it's done in chapters with cliffhangers like it was an old-timey serial. So
fun, yeah.
Brutal world. That I love that story. My favorite of mine, I'm gonna go with Good Deeds, which is a holiday story. It's kind of a spoof of the Christmas shoe story. If I had time to think about, if I knew the question was coming, I would have gone through and I probably would have come up with a different answer, but on the spot, I will say Good Deeds, which is about a guy who writes the equivalent of the Christmas shoes song, and it's so depressing that it has very tragic and horrific consequences for the world.
That sounds delightful for a holiday story. Yeah. That's
now,
really
it was originally in the anthology Hark the Herald Angels Scream, but it's also in Candy Coated Madness as a reprint.
Okay. Okay, that's cool. Yeah, if you have 100 stories to go through, that could take a little while to weigh the relative merits. I understand. Yeah. So, Teal wants to know, were you inspired by aluminum siding salesman for this tale? I think he was typing in a hurry, and I understand the question. Yeah,
Nice work, Phil.
yeah. Well,
I was not. I really don't know where the inspiration came from, except that I thought it would be funny for a guy to obviously not be in a virtual reality simulation.
right, and yet he pays for everyday life, and yeah, he pays them to give what they want. Yeah, that's really cool. So, and the other question I have for you is I understand you lived in Alaska as a child,
Yep.
And you went back. How did you get back to this part of the world?
Well, I've lived there pretty much my whole childhood, and then I moved to Ohio, which was also really cold. And then I said, I'm done with cold. So I moved to Arizona, but then I met my wife, Lynn Hansen, online when that was a weird thing. Now it's normal. But
you're setting the trend. Yeah.
Back in 95, that was weird and deranged. And so I moved to Florida, and we lived in Florida for over 20 years and then moved to Georgia. So it's generally a warm weather thing.
Okay. And Georgia's closer to driving up north for a convention, so that's smart. Yeah. And Jill points out, speaks good, I do, right bad, I does. Yeah. Yeah. So he types in a hurry. We have one last question from Brian, who wants to know, what's your favorite birthday drink?
I don't really drink alcohol that much.
That's okay. It doesn't have to be alcoholic.
Like right now, I'm having a refreshing squirt, but
I'm really glad you held up the can with that. Yeah.
Yeah. Probably. I don't know. I'm going to go with a energy drink Nose.
Okay. All right. Now I'm starting to understand how you get 100 stories and 50 novels and like 5 or 6 out this year. Now I'm starting to understand it's energy drinks. Okay.
Yes.
That's fair. That's fair. Well, cool. No, this is really fun. That was a fun story, and I really appreciate you sharing it with us. I think it'd be really fun if we asked all the other readers to come back up and chat with us a little bit. Yeah, Jim, can you do your magic? There's Rick. I just want to say, in the midst of doing all this fun stuff, Jim is like the man behind the curtain in The Wizard of Oz. He's like pulling all the levers and moving all the things and bringing people in and out, while the thing is going on live. So thanks for all the tech stuff that you do, Jim. Yeah.
It's fun. I've got to keep pedaling though to make sure that the internet doesn't run out of juice.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe we should just take all the cats and put them on a treadmill and let them go. Yeah. Because Danielle, I saw one of the office interns in the picture behind you as well. So
yeah, that Spot. Yeah. She's tired.
Yeah, she had a long time. So
what do you guys have coming up next? We've heard some great stories tonight from recently published books, and I know you all have things in the works. And Jeff, you're mightily prolific. You have how many more books coming out before the end of the year?
One.
Oh, one. Okay.
One.
Is that the recently announced Writing Life?
Yeah, it comes out on the 14th, which happens to be my 50th birthday. So it is the first nonfiction book, and it's called The Writing Life: Reflections, Recollections, and a Lot of Cursing. And it is not really a memoir, but there are lots of personal anecdotes in it. And it's like a combination comedy sort of memoir writing advice book, not in a how to write a wonderful query letter or how to format your manuscript, but what happens when you have a book signing and no one shows up, and how to cope with rejection, and when you get that 1-star review on the book that you spent years writing. It's that kind of stuff. It's like a lot of the less pleasant aspects of writing and how I kept going all these years later.
It's all the stuff we pretend doesn't happen.
But it happens in the book. It pulls the curtain behind all the stuff that you pretend on Facebook. You say, wow, so many people showed up to my book signing. We had to turn them away.
Exactly. And we'll give everyone a look at the cover.
That is it. Cover by Lynn Hansen.
There we go. Now you can see the whole thing.
Nice.
Yeah, it looks great.
Cool part, the stuff, all those writing supplies were actually photographed, and if you probably when you get the paperback edition and can see it up close, the Those are actual Lynn Hansen teeth marks on the pencil. Chewed on elements. So,
That seems oddly appropriate.
yeah.
Lynn's very dedicated to her craft.
Yes.
Well, that's great. Congratulations on 50 books, Jeff. And, early happy birthday wishes to you.
Thank you.
You're 2 days ahead of me for the birthday. I follow you on the 16th.
Ooh.
50.
Good to know.
Yeah, I'm hitting 50.
Are you serious?
Oh, yeah.
So I'm 2 days older than you?
Exactly. Yeah, I probably shouldn't admit that, how old I am, but
Yeah, my birthday's in January, and I won't tell you how many times I've had a 50th birthday. We're not even going to go there.
Well, happy birthday to you.
oh, well, thank you. But that's great that you have a book coming out on your birthday. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to time it to my 20th anniversary of my first book, and I didn't get it done in time. So I thought, well, 50 years old, that's another milestone.
Yes. That's great.
Danielle, you have some fun stuff coming up, don't you?
I do.
Always.
This copious amount of free time that we've had, me not as much as everyone else, but I went through some of my old chips and files and discovered that I probably have enough collected things for like 6 or 7 books. So I'm funding 3 of those right now. More Tips from the Handyman, which is in my literary handyman series. And 2 short story collections, one fantasy, the other a rare horror volume. And I'm giving the backers the opportunity to possibly pick the titles of the 2 fiction collections, so they don't have titles right now. And I'm also, as a publisher and a writer, working on a brand new novella series called Systema Paradoxa. And it's in conjunction with Cryptid Crate subscription box, where we are creating a series of unrelated novellas under the Systema Paradoxa series for inclusion in those boxes, then later released commercially.
Subscription boxes are so cool because if you like something, somebody goes to the trouble to get all the stuff you want and sends it to you. You know, it's like a birthday present every month or every other month or whatever. That's really cool.
Yeah. Fun surprises. And they've come up with some really cool things for these collection, for the boxes that include these volumes. They're coming up with all original content for everything that's in the box. And some of it's actually based on the artwork from the book, which is amazing.
Cool. And Rick, are you translating your book into 14 different more languages? Is that
Yeah, it's going to take a while. It's I'm learning Japanese right now. No, I'm working on my next dinosaur thriller for Severed Press. I just started it, so have no idea when it's going to be coming out, but I'm having a ton of fun writing it.
Cool. Oh, that's exciting. You know, I wonder, when you go out and you walk around in the woods, do you worry? Is there something behind every tree?
Let me put it this way. When my son was little, he was terrified of the dark. And he says, "Daddy, how come you're not scared of the dark?" I said, "That's because I'm the scariest thing in the dark." I'm the scariest thing in the woods, most likely. So no, I'm not afraid when I walk around.
And Rick's son was forever after frightened of his father.
Yes.
Oh, that's fun.
I picture, like, if we ever went to your house in your backyard, you have like those dinosaur slides and the pterodactyl swing set.
And that's for me. That's not, I don't let my son go on it. I mean, if I'm not around, he can go on it. But yeah, that's mostly for me.
Yeah. I have a question for everybody. What do you think? We're coming to the end of this ridiculous 1-star year do not recommend. You know, we're coming up into 2021. Are you feeling some light at the end of the tunnel, and maybe it's not a train? Are you feeling optimistic with the new year? What do you think? How's everybody doing?
I work in healthcare. I just want it to be done.
Yes. You have a long day every day. Yeah. So
I'm waiting for November. Did I miss November? Did that happen? I'm sorry.
this is the longest march I've ever seen. Yeah.
Yeah. Welcome to the final level of Jumanji.
Carol, how about you? Do you have anything, any projects on the horizon?
I have a bunch of short stories that I'm working on. I have a novella that I'm almost done with, and I have a novel in progress as well. So
Is that my novella?
yes, it is.
Yay!
Oops, I just bumped my computer. It wasn't the cat, that one was me. So
What about you, Jim?
Yes,
Where's your novella?
Well, I actually have other news to report this month.
That's sidestepping the question.
Yes, exactly. Just in time for the holidays, Dark Regions Press has released Christmas Horror Volume 3, which includes a story by me and many other fine authors. And I think they're actually reissuing some kind of package where you can get Christmas Volume Horror 1, 2, and 3. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Jeff, you're in Volume 1.
I'm in actually 1, 2, and 3. So.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
It's a trifecta. Awesome. All right. So wait, so we're both in 3.
Yes, we are.
Terrific.
It's around.
That's great.
Who's hiding the dog?
What was that?
I said, who's hiding the dog?
Oh, he just came down for an investigation and he just departed. He couldn't get my attention. He came over. He did a little scurry and a shake of the collar, and I didn't look at him until he left.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, mine doesn't leave. Mine just gets more and more annoyed. The cat. Yeah.
Got it. All right. So, well, I want to thank our readers. What a fantastic evening. You guys really brought some great stories and did wonderful readings, and we appreciate it. Thank you so much for sharing those. Look for those books that are available. And coming up, our next Galactic Terrors session will be on January 14th. And we're going to be announcing the full lineup soon, but so far it looks like we'll have Lee Murray reading with us from New Zealand, which is amazing.
Oh.
Very cool.
Lee's a fantastic author, and she writes really just with a distinctive voice, and we're looking forward to having Lee with us. And of course, our own Stephen Van Patten, who also has a very distinctive voice. And we could not ask Stephen to read in December because he has this niche of inappropriate Santa Claus horror stories that he created for himself as a horror subgenre.
They're wonderful, but yeah.
But not appropriate for prime time.
He's now going to read it in January, right?
If I know Stephen, he'll write a new one and it'll be New Year's themed or something.
That could be good. That could be great. Yeah.
But we do this every second Thursday of the month. So keep an eye out for us. If you are interested, please sign up for our newsletter. We're going to ramp that up coming up in January, and we'll probably have some announcements coming early next year for some fun things to do with the newsletter. So you can find that there. Of course, as they say, like and subscribe. We're on YouTube. Click subscribe to below to follow future Galactic Terrors on YouTube. You can also find our Facebook page, Horror Writers Association New York Chapter Facebook page. We're broadcasting there as well. And you can always come and check out our website, hwany.org, for lots of details and information and to connect with us.
And we do info Galactic Terrors there too. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So before we go, if you haven't already, pop a happy birthday message in the comments for Jeff, who's turning 50 soon. And do our readers have any last holiday wishes or words for the audience?
Have a great one.
Yeah. Stay alive. Please.
Dr. Fauci said that Santa Claus is immune from COVID, so the presents will arrive.
Let him in your house. It's okay.
But we aren't, so stay home.
Yeah, and wash your hands. Yeah.
All right. Well, until next time, everyone. Oh, go ahead, Carol.
And just one last thought. We've dropped a lot of the links into the chat here, but the other thing we're going to do is below the YouTube, we're going to put the links to the different writers so you can find out more information about them as well. So thanks.
Terrific. All right. So until next time, everybody stay safe and healthy. Keep reading. And since we won't see you until 2021, have happy holidays and a very, very pleasant new year. Take care.
Bye.
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 Bye-bye.
this the after party? Where are we?